For 12 long years, the world watched a perfect Hollywood dream quietly rot from the inside. Behind the red carpet smiles, behind the legends and the headlines, a father and his only daughter drifted into a silence no camera ever captured. Now that silence has cracked open, and the truth is darker, more fragile, and far more human than anyone ever dared to imagine. The dream that began like a movie. Everyone remembers the legend, the megastar with the million-dollar smile. The girl from Ohio who once whispered a fantasy no one ever took seriously. But no one knew that the moment Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes crossed paths in 2005, a Hollywood prophecy had begun to breathe. She was 26, glowing, innocent, still carrying the softness of a small-town dreamer. He was 43, untouchable, a titan carved from blockbuster history. Top Gun, Mission, Impossible, Jerry Maguire. His very name could stop time, and when he saw her, he didn't hesitate. "I'm going to marry her," he reportedly told his team. It sounded absurd. It sounded impossible. And yet, it was already happening. The world watched a fire ignite, Rome, flashbulbs, fingers intertwined. Two people laughing like teenagers, as if the universe itself had surrendered to their chemistry. Tom Cruise, usually controlled, reserved, became a man swept away by something raw and reckless. And then came the moment that shook American pop culture, the Oprah couch incident. He jumped. He yelled. He declared his love with the intensity of a man who didn't know how to whisper. Some called it sweet. Others called it strange. But everyone watched. Then, on April 18, 2006, the miracle arrived. Suri, small, bright, a child born into a destiny she never asked for. Tom called it the happiest day of his life. He held her like proof that love could rewrite fate. But beneath the joy, something more complicated was already tightening its grip. Scientology, its silence, its rituals, its power. Katie, the Catholic girl from Toledo, suddenly found herself navigating a belief system she barely understood. A world where childbirth happened without a single spoken word. A world where Tom monitored her pregnancy with a sonogram machine he bought for their home. To some, it looked controlling. To him, it was devotion. By November, they were married in a $3 million fairy tale ceremony inside a 15th century Italian castle. Celebrities filled the room. Cameras captured perfection. But behind Katie's luminous smile, her parents felt the first tremor of dread. Something was shifting. Quietly, inevitably. Because what the world saw as a love story was, for Katie, the beginning of a life shaped by secrecy and absolute control. And for Suri, it was the first page of a childhood that would never truly belong to her. The perfect family begins to crack. For a moment, they looked untouchable. Tom Cruise, Katie Holmes, and little Suri, the trio that seemed carved straight from a Hollywood fantasy. Red carpets, private jets, magazine covers that declared them the world's most perfect family. But perfection, as always, was only the surface. And beneath that surface, the first fractures had already begun to spread. It started quietly. Friends noticed that Katie never moved alone. Wherever she went, silent figures from Tom's inner circle trailed behind her, watchful, unreadable, always present. At restaurants, at playgrounds, even during casual walks. They weren't bodyguards. They were observers. One night over dinner, journalist Maureen Orth watched something unsettling unfold. When fans approached their table, Katie smiled politely, then whispered, almost apologetically, "Oh, we don't go outside very much." The words slipped out like a confession. To most people, it sounded harmless. But to anyone familiar with Scientology's rigid structure, it was a warning. Tom remained the force he had always been, charismatic, confident, a man who believed wholeheartedly in the church that shaped his life. To him, Scientology wasn't a religion. It was truth, order, salvation. And as his devotion deepened, So did the distance between him and the woman who once dreamed of marrying him. Katie's parents felt it before she could admit it to herself. As lifelong Catholics, they watched from the sidelines as their daughter became increasingly isolated. Their visits grew fewer, their conversations shorter. The bright, spontaneous Katie they knew was fading into a quieter, more careful version of herself. Even Katie's speech began to change. Friends said she repeated the same scripted praises. "He's amazing. He's wonderful." Words that sounded rehearsed, words that didn't sound like her. Meanwhile, Tom's older children, Bella and Connor, both devoted Scientologists, became symbols of the path he expected Suri to follow, a path Katie feared. By 2010, rumors whispered through Hollywood that she felt trapped. She had begun avoiding certain church events, reconnecting with old colleagues, and spending more time alone in New York. Something inside her was shifting, slowly, secretly. By 2011, the cracks were no longer invisible. Katie's smile stiffened. Her movements grew cautious. She held Suri's hand tighter, as if anchoring her to the only freedom she had left. And silently, she began planning the unthinkable. The escape that would shatter Hollywood's most beautiful illusion.
And I actually really...
The escape that stunned Hollywood. On June 29, 2012, Hollywood woke up to a shockwave. Headlines screamed, phones buzzed, and the dream the world had worshipped for 7 years collapsed in an instant. Katie Holmes had filed for divorce from Tom Cruise. No warning, no rumors, no hint. Just a clean, calculated strike delivered days before his 50th birthday. To the world, it was surprising. To those who understood Scientology, it was war. Behind closed doors, Katie had been preparing for months, moving with the precision of someone who believed every step was being watched. She switched phones, fired staff she didn't trust, hired new security. She even changed her routines so no pattern could be tracked. Her father, Martin Holmes, the quiet lawyer from Ohio, was the mastermind in the shadows. Years earlier, he had helped craft a prenup. Now he was using that same legal architecture to build his daughter a way out. The most crucial decision came next. Katie chose New York over California. New York courts favored the parent seeking sole custody, and custody was the heart of everything. While Tom was busy filming Oblivion in Iceland, she filed the documents in total secrecy. The news reached him the same way it reached the rest of the world, through headlines. For a man who controlled every frame of his public image, it was the first time his life slipped out of his hands. Court documents later revealed the truth Katie had been too afraid to say out loud. She was protecting Suri, protecting her from the church that surrounded their lives, protecting her from a future she didn't choose. Former members would later claim that Katie feared Suri might someday be pushed into Scientology's Sea Org, the program from which few ever escape. The legal battle ended almost as quickly as it began. 11 days. That was all it took. Tom agreed to pay $400,000 a year in child support, plus every medical and educational expense. But money had never been what Katie wanted. The only thing she demanded was distance, legal, physical, spiritual, and she got it. The day after the settlement, she vanished with Suri from Los Angeles. When they resurfaced in New York, paparazzi captured an image that said everything. A mother and daughter walking through Chelsea, hand in hand, without bodyguards, without handlers, without fear. Katie looked exhausted but free. Suri looked quiet but safe. Two people stepping into a life that no longer belonged to Hollywood or to Scientology. And in the empty space left behind, one truth became undeniable. The man who once jumped on a couch to shout his love had never seen this coming. And the daughter he called his miracle had just slipped beyond his reach.
And had a little hint of...
The missing years. After the divorce, Tom Cruise's world and Suri's world split apart so cleanly, it felt as if an invisible wall had been built between them. In 2013, during a rare deposition, Tom was asked whether Katie had left him to protect their daughter from Scientology. He pushed back at the question, called it offensive, but eventually admitted it was true as one of the assertions. It was the closest he ever came to acknowledging the divide that now defined their family. That same year, reports surfaced claiming Tom had seen Suri only once since the divorce, during a brief and private visit. After that moment, the trail went dark. No photos, no public outings, no confirmed meetings. For the world's most recognizable actor, the absence was louder than any headline. As the years unfolded, Tom buried himself in work. New mission, impossible films, global tours, high-risk stunts that had him hanging from airplanes and sprinting across rooftops. Each time he defied gravity, audiences cheered, unaware that the youngest child he once called a miracle was growing up oceans away from him emotionally. Meanwhile, Katie rebuilt a gentler life for Suri in New York. She enrolled her in a private Manhattan school, took her to cafes, parks, dance studios. Together they walked the city like any ordinary mother and daughter, free from the machinery of Hollywood. Friends who saw Suri during those years described a bright, grounded, kind girl, surprisingly unaffected by the fame she was born into. She grew into her mother's reflection, thoughtful, quiet, self-possessed. And whenever her father's name came up, she would simply avoid the topic, as if choosing silence was easier than opening a door she had already closed. Tom, publicly, never spoke of her again. Privately, insiders said he still paid for her schooling and medical expenses, the last remaining ties between two lives that no longer touched. For more than a decade, the distance held, an absence that hardened into routine. A father who commanded the world's attention, and a daughter learning to live without his presence. Two orbits drifting further apart, not with anger, but with a silence neither seemed willing to break. In that silence, a new reality took shape. Some relationships fade not with conflict, but with time.
The set inside the aircraft. And then
A new name, a new life. By 2021, the little girl the world once watched grow up under blinding flashes had quietly transformed into a young woman shaping her own identity. Suri was studying at LaGuardia High School, the place where artists were made, where voices found their power. She acted, she sang, she directed small projects with classmates, steps toward a life far removed from Hollywood's grip. But the real shift came in something small, almost hidden, yet unmistakably powerful. In the program for her school musical, The Addams Family, her name appeared not as Suri Cruz, but as Suri Noel, taking her mother's middle name instead of her father's legendary surname. It wasn't rebellion, it wasn't a stunt, it was a declaration, quiet, steady, irreversible. A young woman choosing who she wanted to be. By June 20th, 24, when she graduated, the name Suri Noel appeared on the official list. Katie Holmes sat among the other parents in New York, clapping with the kind of restrained emotion only a mother who has fought in silence could show. Tom Cruise, meanwhile, was thousands of miles away, photographed at a Taylor Swift concert in London, a detail that stung the public more than it surprised them. The contrast told its own story. The distance between father and daughter wasn't a rumor anymore. It was a fact carved into every milestone he missed. That summer, Suri moved to Pittsburgh to attend Carnegie Mellon University, majoring in fashion. There were no paparazzi, no security teams, no manicured Hollywood moment. Just Katie carrying boxes into a dorm room, helping her daughter begin a life built from normalcy and choice, rather than fame and obligation. Suri blended into campus as just another student, finally free to exist without the weight of a last name the world had always tried to own. In 2025, during the filming of Katie's new project Happy Hours, Suri visited the set. At 19, she looked effortlessly composed. Khaki pants, a white tank top, red sneakers. She moved with the confidence of someone who had survived a childhood lived under scrutiny and then reclaimed the space around her. Many people on set didn't recognize her, and that anonymity was its own quiet victory. Yet even as she built this new life, the truth remained unchanged. She had no relationship with her father, no sightings, no conversations, no attempts at reconciliation. For 12 years, the silence between them had grown so wide that it became part of her story, a shadow she learned to step out of rather than run from. She chose a new name. She chose a new path. She chose freedom. But behind that freedom lingered a question no one could answer: whether the distance she created was meant to protect herself, or whether it was the only way she knew how to heal.
It's pretty exciting. Every day's a little crazy.
The heartbreak behind the headlines. By the fall of 2025, the world had grown used to seeing Suri Noel from a distance, always quiet, always composed, always living just far enough from the legacy she never claimed. But one afternoon in New York, a single moment shattered that carefully built calm. Paparazzi caught her sitting alone on a doorstep, her head buried in her hands, looking exhausted in a way no camera had ever captured before. It was a rare crack in her armor, a glimpse of the weight she had carried for years without complaint. Minutes later, Katie Holmes arrived in an Uber, hurried yet gentle, sitting beside her daughter as if shielding her from a world that had never learned how to leave her alone. They spoke softly, the kind of conversation born from years of surviving with only each other to hold on to. After a few quiet moments, they walked off for pastries, just a mother and daughter moving through a city that had become their refuge. To strangers, it was nothing. To those who knew their story, it was everything. At 19, Suri was now a sophomore at Carnegie Mellon, studying fashion, writing music, trying to understand who she was outside the shadow of her parents' past. But one truth remained unchanged. Her relationship with her father was non-existent. 12 years without a public sighting, 12 years without a shared milestone, 12 years where the only connection between them was a financial obligation he continued to honor, even as the emotional distance grew wider than ever. Tom Cruise, meanwhile, was soaring higher than any Hollywood figure of his generation. Preparing for scenes in outer space with NASA and SpaceX, he seemed determined to push the limits of what a human being and a movie star could physically do. He was reaching beyond Earth itself, but the one distance he never bridged was the one between him and the daughter who once fit perfectly in his arms. Sources close to Katie said she never let bitterness harden the years. She focused on gratitude, on healing, on raising a daughter who could stand on her own. She often said her greatest pride was watching Suri grow into a young woman with strength, empathy, and astonishing independence. Yet even with her new name and new life, Suri carried a story larger than anything she asked for. A story of love, control, silence, and the quiet cost of fame. 19 years. A childhood under scrutiny, a disappearance from a father's world, a rebirth under a new name. And now, as Suri Noel builds the life she chooses, the question that has haunted the public refuses to fade. Will she ever open the door to the man who once called her his miracle? Or has time already sealed that distance for good?
Everyone around me and I get inspired.
The final question, the distance time created. In the end, after 19 years of silence, survival, reinvention, and quiet resilience, the story of Tom Cruise and Suri Noel no longer feels like a Hollywood saga. It feels like a wound time has tried and failed to mend. A father who once held the world in his hands couldn't hold on to the one person who needed only his presence. And a daughter who grew up surrounded by cameras chose the only escape she could, stepping out of his shadow and into a life she built herself, piece by fragile piece. Suri Noel walks through New York now with the certainty of someone who has learned to live without answers. She carries her mother's gentleness, her own determination, and the silence of a childhood defined by distance. Tom Cruise continues to rise, reaching beyond Earth, chasing new heights no actor has ever touched. Yet the one journey he has never made is the one back to her. Maybe he can't. Maybe she won't. Maybe the space between them has grown too vast to cross. But the world keeps wondering. Can a silence this deep ever be undone? Can time heal what fame destroyed? Or has the divide become permanent? Two lives destined to run parallel, never touching, never meeting again? That is the question left behind. Not for Hollywood, not for the headlines, but for anyone who has ever lost someone without a fight, without a goodbye, without a final chance. In the story of Tom Cruise and Suri Noel, there is no ending. Only a door left slightly open and a silence waiting to see if either of them will ever step through it.
Life to me, to spend that time with Oliver, it was